Want me to start? I'm the oldest. My name is Betsy Gadbois, formerly Betsy Smallman. I'm 48 years. Am I 48? Yes, I'm 48 years old. Born in 1976. And my current occupation is I'm a teacher at Spofford Pond School, and I've been teaching at Spofford Pond for 25 years.
I'm Kyle. I'm the middle child. I'm 46. I'm a carpenter. I've been building and repairing houses in town since I got out of school in '96. So I haven't really gone anywhere.
I'm Christy Morley. I am 41, and I'm actually a teacher at North Andover High School. I've been there 17 years, which used to be Johnson High School, which is actually where our grandmother graduated from. And I live in Topsfield now, so I didn't make it that far.
Because we didn't have a high school in Boxford when she lived here. Yeah.
So, when you were younger, how close would you say you were to all your neighbors in the town, both like physically and then socially?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We were, we've actually lived in 4 different places in Boxford, but our original homestead for our family, which started with the Anderson family, at 50 Lakeshore Road, was obviously a little more rural than the other side of Boxford. My auntie Elma, who was Alma Anderson, used to talk about how Kenny Chadwick would kind of keep tabs on that end of town, and when our family moved in, in the 20s, 1920s?
A little later, 1940.
Oh, so during the war?
At the beginning.
That anytime a car came down Lakeshore Road, that the neighbors would stop you and ask you where you were going, who you were there to see. And Kenny Chadwick smoked a pipe, and he sometimes would walk down the street with a shotgun out open over his shoulder and would ask you what neighbor you were going to see. So when we started on Lakeshore Road, it was still that vibe a little bit. There were more houses on the street than there were there before, but a significant amount of them were horse farms. And Walter Morris's farm on Lakeshore Road, which was raspberries and a berry picking farm, and the Nasons in West Boxford. But we were pretty far away from neighbors, but had our cousins right next door because the original plot of land was split in half, and my uncle David Smallman put a home on the other half of the property. So we had our cousins next door, but not a lot of neighbors within earshot, at least, of the house.
Yeah, I remember we had a pathway between the two houses. We called it the stream, and we used to go back and forth between the houses. But I think different from now, and like my own children, like we roamed pretty far back in the woods. We had the Hebs nearby, so for me, I'm the youngest. I knew who they were. Brittany Heb was my age, but I'd say I hung out with my cousins the most in the neighborhood.
Hung out in the gravel pit, though.
Yeah.
In the Hebs gravel pit.
Yeah, we'd go back through the woods to Johnson Pond, and we had a fort in the back there and like a playhouse in the woods that we would hang out in. But we knew the neighbors down the street too. I knew enough growing up to know that he was there the whole time, right?
No. Yeah.
When did he?
Yeah,
In the
moved
80s.
In the 80s. So,
89.
Carly
so when I
Ostrowski.
was little, Carly Ostrowski moved in, and down the street, I'm trying to think who else. The Littles were down the street. Trick-or-treating was a little different. The houses weren't that close together.
We did it in the
took a
back
while.
of a pickup truck. Yeah, we would
A
get
lot
driven
of our
around.
friends when we were young were older people. Because that's pretty much who lived out, the Mulcahy's, and they were just friendly with our grandparents and stuff. So it wasn't until the mid '80s or so that we actually started having kids move in. When they started building stuff, mid to late '80s, and then I think we had we had one kid in my grade that moved in. I think that was pretty big.
In West.
In West, yeah, right.
West Boxford, yeah.
Yeah.
because we called East New Money. That was where all the
We won't tell you what they called us.
even when we were younger, you could tell the difference between East and West.
Well, it was a matter of East Boxford's always been right on the highway here, so a lot of your
Commuters.
commuters into the city. You know, your white collar workers ended up living on this side of town, where it was far more agricultural on the west side of town. Obviously, a lot less rural. You know, a lot of the tracts of land were a lot bigger, where this side of town was 20 or 30 years ahead of what was going on over there.
Yeah. And even the schools, if you were a West kid, you went to Spofford Pond, and Spofford Pond was K to 6. And if you were an East kid, you went to Cole School, and that was K to 6 there. And when I was in first grade, so that was probably 82, the town did kind of a restructuring because we did have more young families coming in the east side, and I think that Cole School was a little overrun with more kids, and they restructured and made the structure we have now, which is K to 2 at Cole School and 3 to 6 at Spofford. So I had to go over to Cole School for second grade, which
They were
was
still using the wood building when you were young.
Yeah.
You know, for school instead of town offices.
Yeah, which was a huge change, and I remember big fights over that. You know, that they did not like that restructuring, because West, we were pretty proud of that vibe we had going on over there, and I did go over to Cole School for 1 year, and it stayed that way since, and now there's more discussion about how big we are in general, and how, you know, we've gotten to up to, I think, 8 classrooms in each grade, but even, I think when we restructured that time, there were maybe only 2 classrooms at each grade level, but even that was kind of, we were busting at the seams. But that was an interesting shift that was in the early 80s, and then in the mid 80s, late 80s is when a lot of developments came in. A lot of, like, Great Pond, when did Great Pond Drive? That was early 90s,
That was like 92.
Porter Road
Yep.
went in, and a lot of other kind of tracts of land that farmers started selling off pieces of what they had. And there were sometimes individual spec houses, but then like 2 or 3 houses would go in, like right off of 133.
Where?
Parish Lane.
Parish Lane, you know, like places like that
We
went
also
in.
weirdly know the names of
Yeah, we all
every
know the names of
street.
every street and what.
But I think socially, like the difference I think between, so there's a 7-year difference between Betsy, who's the oldest, and I'm the youngest, is that the late 80s, that's when I was in school, and so I was at the village school at the Congregational Church in West Boxford, and that's where socially I met a lot of friends who I actually am still friends with today, but they still lived quite a ways, so even pulling from different areas of West Boxford, it wasn't like we could ride bikes to each other's houses. So my kids growing up in Topsfield Center are having a very different experience where they can walk and ride bikes to the park and to each other's houses. Mine was like a bribery from my parents to try to, you know, in the winter especially, if Dad was plowing, I'd be like, can you pick up so-and-so on your plow route and drop them off, and they can stay for 3 days until we can get them home again.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think physically distant, but ironically, in a lot of ways, I look at the neighborhood I live in now, where I live on a postage stamp in downtown Topsfield, and I don't know my neighbors as well now as I did growing up in that house in West Boxford, and even when we moved to Main Street around the corner in West Boxford, same thing. I think we knew each other a lot better.
Yeah, we did. We played cards and had meals and stuff together, corn in the summer, and, you know, whatever. We did. We knew our neighbors pretty well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there weren't a lot of them.
Maybe why.
So you mentioned there was like a little bit of friction between East and West Boxford. What was that like at Masco? Did that persist?
It's still around today. 100%.
Yeah. We'll even say to each other sometimes, you know, well, they're from East.
Yeah.
You know, or
Well, my wife of 20 years is a girl from East Boston. And we still chuckle about it. People, when we started dating, I definitely heard, I can't believe you're dating a girl from East Boxford.
She was a horse person though, so that saved her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, so I was in 6th grade when we moved from west to east, and I remember my parents dealing with comments from like other people in town about,
As somebody
like you're moving on up over to the east side. I was upset about it. I still today, people ask me, being in town, and I coach in town and teaching nearby, where are you from? And I'm always very specific to say I'm from West Boxford, because there is a big difference, I think, as far as like generational presence versus more recent movement. Yeah.
I've worked with my father, and since taking over the business, we lost jobs due to that. There were people that wouldn't hire us because we were, like, our family had moved. Like she said earlier, we moved all over town. And when for a while when we lived on this side of town, there were longtime friends that wouldn't work with us anymore because we were over on the other side of town.
Yeah, and Christmas, we used to host a big Christmas Eve open house, like after church, before and after church. And the first year, and we moved for different reasons, but my father rehabbed a barn that Mr. Lockwood, it was a hay barn on Haymeadow Road, and then a second barn over on Middleton Road. Those were the 3rd and 4th houses. So there were like other reasons other than just moving to East. But that first year that we lived in East, there were West Boxford people that didn't come to the Christmas Eve open house that they'd been coming to for 30 years.
40 years, yeah.
Just as kind of like we're not coming, we're not, it's too far. They said it was too far to come over to East from Christmas Eve after church. So I was bummed about that. Like, I was just like, oh, because the tradition means a lot to me and all that. But
I think likewise, like, I understand too, for my mom, it was hard, like it's a solid 20, where we live, it's a solid 20-minute drive to Masco. So, that was a lot, I think, once you get to your 3rd kid, driving them back and forth, or the bus picked us up at like an ungodly hour in the morning.
Like a few minutes before 6
I
a.m.
was the spoiled one. I didn't really take the bus because by that point my mom would drive back and forth. But it was very early. So I think at Masco it was more like socially, like we were seen as, stereotypically, we were the ones that were like doing bonfires and could probably build a fire in the woods and get you through what you needed to do. But I think definitely, I feel like the kids from West had a bit more of, maybe because generationally we were there longer, but we were the ones that had like the most pride, I feel like, in being from Boxford. So
Still do.
Like that was a big piece of it. Like my friend Nick Wall and I were probably 2 of the few that were from West Boxford that it was like very much a badge of honor for us going through Masco.
Yeah.
We helped you fix your trucks when they broke down.
Yes. We were the kids you could rely on. And a lot of like our first jobs and everything, like my first job was Inglesby Farm, and Gordon Price had me weeding the pumpkin fields on my hands and knees as an 11-year-old kid for like $2.25 an hour, something like that. And I worked at the West store, forever, all through middle school and high school, when I had no business selling lottery tickets at 14 years old or whatever. But we knew everybody in town. I knew Mr. Hagan wanted his coffee at 5:30 a.m. and I had the coffee going before he came in, and Mr. Manuel had his own stool, and I wish my own kids had more of that in their life. That human connection and those patterns and traditions and all of that. It's pretty cool.
Let's see. This is a good one, actually, because when I interviewed Richard King about this, he was like, I didn't talk to anyone in town, I didn't do any of this, but annual events, that you remember? So like, there's the Apple Festival now. The Apple Festival's been around for forever.
Yeah.
Do you remember like that specifically, or things like that?
I remember the Apple Festival, yeah.
Yeah.
Our parents were real involved as we got older with the BAA and stuff. So like, our mom ran the 4th of July parade
Yeah,
for a large number of years. We were always involved in that stuff. They used to have parties and stuff at the Morse Farm during harvest and all that. Not like a town-wide thing, but there were things like that went on all the time. You know, smaller, that close-knit group over on the other side of town, you know, always had stuff like that.
Yeah, the 4th of July was big.
Yeah. I think that's my big, and it just, we still, my kids, when we're in town on the 4th, will come and do the 5, well, now the 5K used to only be a 5 mile. Again, the things that we hold over people's heads, like, oh, well, we used to have to run 5 miles. But we'll do that, and like even this year after the parade, it was a little short this year. There weren't as many like floats, and you know, people will still come up to me and be like, God, it's not like it was when your mom ran it. And there were like a lot of families that would do floats. That was probably, I mean, I remember for years being asked in school, like an icebreaker, what's your favorite holiday? And I'd always say the 4th of July, because it was so fun. Like we'd be here and type the parade, and the other difference was you'd go back to Cole School, and there'd be like a huge community gathering there with three-legged races. I think they're starting to bring that back a little bit more for the little kids. There's
Jimmy
big
Nason would bring
barbecue
the,
and
Jimmy Nason,
Stonehouse Farm over in West
Yeah.
Boxford used to, I mean, he can cook 75 half chickens at once. You know,
Yeah.
we'd set it up at the school, and we'd, you know, somebody donate the birds, and we'd have a huge barbecue, and the kids
Yeah.
would play ball, you know, and your
It was like a real
quintessential
old New England.
potato sack race and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think Memorial Day too is similar. We still, I struggle with my own kids being in Topsfield or on, you know, which town are we going to go to for Memorial Day services? So that was another big one. I don't know what annual events, but like certain things that when I think back that I remember that aren't, again, like town-wide is more, you mentioned like strawberries already, but it was like strawberry season. I always knew that we were going to go out and pick strawberries in the backfield, and my grandfather who lived in Topsfield, it was like his favorite thing to do, and he'd come every year, and we'd walk back in Morse's Field and go pick strawberries, and that was like our June event. And then like picking corn all summer, you know, like we used to just walk into Inglesby's Fields in the
Walk
West
across
40,
the West
walk
40,
across the
grab,
street.
like we'd like pick a dozen years off. My dad built Inglesby farm stand, and they told him, and you know, go ahead
1979.
and pick
Yeah.
a few years for dinner whenever you want, Al. And so
And we would.
those are the
He'd
big
send us on
things.
our bike. Go get us one. Go get.
My husband said he calls me corn snob because I can't handle corn, people buying corn in the grocery store, and I yell at our friends when they cook it wrong. Or when they shuck it in the store before they bring it home. It makes me really angry. But those are things, it was like corn season, like picking strawberries. I think one event that wasn't annual, but that was that's I think like exemplary of, again, why we loved being from West Boxford, was when Nason's barn burned down. And I mean, you're little, I was little, so my sense of time, I don't know how long it took, but my dad organized like an Amish style barn raising. And I remember like helping my mom bring food and make food, and everybody in the community volunteered for like, was it several weekends?
No, 2 weekends.
2 weekends,
Yeah.
and we all got, like, everybody got together. I won't say we, I didn't help build it, and helped build the barn. And I was little, but it was stuff like that, like, so not necessarily like, now we have like Boxtoberfest in the town, things like that, or Winterfest, which is awesome. And I know like our grandmother would be so happy to know that those things are going on, but it was, I guess, more like one-off event things
Well, the
like
thing,
that.
like with Nason's barn, that was just, there was some kids from Haverhill that were burning
That
down
was an arson
barn. I
situation.
mean, there was 4 barns around here, 2 in North Andover and 2 in West Park, just old historical barns that they burned down. And so that wasn't so much of a community thing, that was just something that happened, and everybody dropped what they were doing.
Yeah,
you
the
know?
rebuilding was
And
something I'll always remember.
you know what we do, we're carpenters, you know, we got all the lumber donated and stuff, and we just needed people, and everybody just put on hold whatever they were doing. You know, that wasn't necessarily like a planned thing. Hey, this weekend we gotta get Henry's barn back up, you know. And so we did.
Yeah.
Everybody just put their lives on hold for a couple weekends, and
Yeah.
we got it done, and then everybody went back to life. You know,
Yeah.
that's just the way it went.
Yeah, things revolved around the industry here. So or people's businesses. So like Inglesby Farm
Yeah.
would have little things every once in a while, or if it was pumpkin season or that kind of thing, then things revolved around that. And we all three of us worked like from really young ages, and it was always under the table when we were younger, working for somebody here or there. Because now, kids don't even go get jobs until they're 16 because they'll say it's illegal, I can't do that. And be like, really? I've been working since I was like 10. And that's what you did. You had a job, whether it was babysitting or you babysat somebody's kids, or you did both at the same. Gordon Price had me babysitting and painting his deck, at the same time at Inglesby Farm. But you worked. That's what you did.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our social life revolved around work, wherever we were at that time. I would say that for sure.
Oh, 100%.
This might be a little random, but if you worked under the table, when did you work over the table?
Like our first legit pay.
Yeah.
Legit job.
Like, now you gotta pay taxes. And,
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I don't think I had, actually I do know what mine is, because it's like I stepped out of this circle was when I was a waitress at Sylvan Street Grill. I think that was my first legit, on the books paycheck. But my whole time working at Inglesby Farm, at, the West Store, that was all, I think.
Don't worry, statute of limitations.
I know, it's been a while.
We're
But
good.
I mean, that was all through high school. I started waitressing at Sylvan Street at 18, so I was a legit adult at that point. But we also had a cafe here in town where the animal hospital is in West Boxford, like a little bit past Benson's on the left.
The Mermaid Cafe.
The Mermaid Cafe. We had
It's like a breakfast place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember that.
I worked there all through high school too, and I waitressed there, and I'm pretty sure that was under the table, and it was all like locals. But that was a breakfast place, and they served booze, which was like another big fight, because you could go and have like mimosas and stuff with your breakfast.
I don't think that was necessarily.
I don't think. I don't know if that was on the books either. But it was a younger. She was. I know Elaine's gonna be pissed that I even said that, but she was a local too, and she tried to make it go of like this business. So I would work at the store, whenever, and then I had like 3-4 shifts a week at the Mermaid Cafe, and we didn't have a dishwasher or anything. Remember, the dishes would pile up.
Yeah, I'd wash them.
You wash them. That's right. Yeah. And
I think mine was, because I'm trying to remember what the law was. I think it was 14,
Yeah.
right? So my first, I babysat and stuff through middle school, and then I think it was Dick Yeoman was my first. Oh, yeah. So Dick Allman, who actually lived in East, but was another person who's still with us. You'd probably be interviewing for this. He had a landscaping company, and at maybe a little less than 14, but at 14, my best friend and I, we laid sod and did like landscape construction for him in 9th grade. Like that was our first, that was definitely on the books, like taxes coming out.
I was gonna say he wouldn't have that.
No, yeah, that was legit, because it was hard labor, but that was again like an example of, I look at what my daughter's first job will be, and it probably won't be landscape construction.
Right. Or a waitress at 12.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty.
Was yours Far Corners?
For me, probably first time I got a paycheck was probably 14 years old at Far Corners Golf Course,
Oh yeah, I forgot. about
doing
that. Yeah.
maintenance and whatever they needed for the most part. Had worked there for years beforehand, but I think I started getting a check at 14. Because that's when I learned about taxes and how
Well, yeah, my first paycheck from Sylvan Street, who was Ernie Tremblay, who was a Topfield guy, and he owned, still does, but there was only the one in Danvers at the time, or Peabody. It's on actually half the building is in Danvers, half's in Peabody. I remember looking at the taxes part, and I was like, "What in the hell is this? They're taking this off my paycheck.
Yeah.
What is this? They took half my paycheck." Yeah. That's what it was, I think.
And then I'm trying to think where else. I worked at the driving range and the mini golf course over at Middleton as well.
You branched out a little more than
I
Carolyn
did.
and
I was gonna say I was.
Christy's a little more worldly
We lived,
than we
yeah,
are.
we lived in East, and those were probably my 2 summer. And then I worked for my dad for
Yeah.
a long time in summer.
Oh yeah, we always worked for Dad.
Yeah.
We had a family business, and so we did plow bills. We did trash runs. As soon as we could drive, we were helping. Right,
Maybe-
shuttling trucks.
Maybe a little beforehand.
Maybe a little beforehand, but yeah.
It's like, what was it? My mom says she remembers learning to drive at like 8 or 9 years
Yeah,
old
mhm.
because my grandparents are Italian and they lived in like a super rural part and they would just put her
Yeah.
on like an empty dirt road and
Yeah.
don't go into the little canal and you're good.
Yeah.
I see my high school kids now. It's more and more prevalent that they're very nervous to drive, and I see a lot of kids not getting their license, and it's
Sister.
mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was driving some sort of motorized vehicle from whether it was like a lawnmower or a 4-wheeler or a go-kart
Dirt bike.
or his Jeep
Yeah.
around like our dirt road up in Maine at our camp, that like I could not wait to get my license and had like, maybe it's bad, 0 hesitation or fear because it was such a comfortable thing.
Yeah.
And now I definitely see like more and more high school kids are uninterested in
Yeah.
getting their license.
Even just this past weekend, less than 48 hours ago, I was up in Islesboro, Maine, where my mother-in-law grew up, and somebody brought this old like Chrysler with a 3-speed, the shifter in the floor, and no one could drive it. Like people were like, the teenage kids that were there were like, "Oh my God, what even is that?" And I got in it because I was the only one, and I'm like this middle-aged, a tired-looking woman, and my husband's uncle, who I adore, he's like, "Betsy can drive it," and I had like, water. I'm like, "What? Okay, yeah, where do you need it to go?" And I get right in it and fire up the clutch and do the whatever, because that was what we needed to, like my father took me in the Heads gravel pit with a 3-speed dump truck that we had at the time, that big old brown one.
Yep, C60.
Yeah, and I was probably 14, and because it was before we moved, and we moved from 50 Lakeshore when I was 14.
Yep, 1990.
And he just told me what to do with the clutch and just said, figure it out. And I don't know if anybody's ever smelled a clutch burning in a 3-speed dump truck, but it's really something. It's the worst smell ever. But I figured it out, and I, got around. There was like a kind of circular part, and I got around, and then I can get in anything and drive it. Get in any, whatever it is, as long as you kind of tell me if there's anything squirrely about it, like I can drive it. But that, I had so much pride in that this weekend when I got in it. There's all these like teenage kids,
Absolutely.
and they were, Uncle Donnie yelled, who's 87, "Betsy can drive it," and I get in and take it right away, and it was this super old Chrysler. But yeah, that's what you did. If you didn't know how to do stuff, you weren't valuable. So like, you made yourself valuable, and you knew how to do things and how to figure stuff out. But the same as we joke about manual transmissions and cursive writing.
Yeah.
Like kids now
Yeah.
can't. Nobody can drive a manual transmission, and no one can read cursive.
Yeah.
It's like a secret language.
I'm on like the fringe of that because conceptually I know what a manual is and I tried to, but I haven't figured it
mastered
out.
it.
It
Yeah.
like lurches everywhere. And I know cursive, but like I'm not super comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm like right on the line.
Yeah.
It's always my, again, with being a teacher with icebreakers with my colleagues and kids, like whenever somebody says like, "and share one fact that people would be surprised to know about you." That's always it's like I made a living for a while driving a 1-ton dump truck.
Yeah. Yep. We figured that out.
Yeah, so I guess Masco, what was it like going to Masco your age? I'm assuming you guys have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do they go to are they like high school age or are they younger?
Mine are, yeah. So my daughter's going this year, so she'll be starting 7th grade at Masco in a few weeks, which is bizarre.
And I live in Danvers, right over by St. John's Prep, so my kids went to school in Danvers, and both of my boys actually went to Essex. The one's still going, my younger one is at Essex Tech, and my oldest one just graduated from there. So within 10 minutes-ish, but not at Masco.
So I very much have never been able to get away from that vibe in West Box. I have a large piece of land in New Hampshire with a farm and animals and all that, and I have 3 kids. One of them will be done in high school December. One of them's a sophomore, and the other one's in 6th grade. They can all drive standards. They
They do, yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they
They can build the standard too, I feel like.
yeah, very much so. My daughter's currently working doing excavation with my best friend. But the high school, as far as my family, we like to be outside at our farm a lot of the time, and where we live is very much like that. Kind of what we were talking about earlier about your neighbors and stuff. I know all my neighbors very well. My neighbors just walk in my house. So it's a little bit different than my experience was with high school down here, let alone the obvious stuff like internet and all that. It's totally different. But my kids are not a step behind, but it's just a little bit different, if that makes sense. It's not quite so much of a pressure cook. There's a lot of vocational programs available to them. We're still members of 4-H and stuff like that, which used to be in town here and is gone now. FFA and all that stuff. So.
I think it's interesting. So it's funny, I consider the 3 towns kind of all one town because we're all one school district in a lot of ways. So my kids are growing up in Topsfield. I have a different last name, obviously, because I got married. I am the youngest by 7 years and 4 years, so there are other parents in town that don't know who I am. They don't realize that I'm Betsy's younger sister or Kyle's younger sister right away. And it's a funny, I guess, balance to have of once people realize, like, oh, you grew up here, and your dad grew up here, and your grandmother grew up here, and people will start to explain things to you about how things work at Masco, and I try to find that balance of being like, I know.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, being like, no, I know. And then, I don't know, because my husband's from New York, so I think sometimes people assume that we're all from New York. And then they kind of realize, like, oh God, why didn't you say something sooner about who you are? But there's a few teachers left at Masco that were there when I was there, so that's kind of funny to see my daughter go through that.
Yeah.
I got her schedule a couple weeks ago.
I had a lot of the same teachers my parents had, so that's funny for you
I
that
had-
they'll have, because school wasn't my strongest suit, but I would, if I fell asleep in class, they'd yell at me and call me Alan a lot, and I'd be like, well, I'm not Alan, I'm not paying attention.
Well, we get that question too, like, are you Alan's child or David's child? Because David was a little more well behaved than our father was. So every class, like in middle school and high school, they'd be like,
Yeah.
I remember people would be looking down, they'd look up, you belong to David or Alan? And I go, Alan.
And one of the teachers
They'd
said
look
to
down
me,
and be like, ugh.
I remember Miss Miller said to me, she's like, all you Smallmans, it's like they made a rubber stamp and they just keep stamping their faces out. You all look the same. But,
And vice versa, you meet people in town and they'll be new to town or whatever, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know who, you bought so-and-so's house.
yeah, or like we knew who built people's houses.
Yeah.
You know a lot more about
a lot of
people's
times
lives.
it was us. That,
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was on vacation with some friends last week, and one of the other husbands also grew up in Boxford, and the third husband did not. And he was describing to me where something was in town, and I kept saying, no, I know. Yes, I know. Where you mean? Yes, I know. And the other one who grew up in town, Mike, was there, and he's looking back and forth between the two of us. And the other guy said, why are you looking at me? He goes, I'm just having a lot of fun watching you try to explain to her where something is in Boxford. Because she knows. And I was like, and so it's funny, like the kids' friends, and I don't think my kids realize also that, that's the same school. It's a different building, but our mom also works at Masco still. So she's in the athletic department.
She's been there, 28 years?
Yeah, since my 10th grade year. So some of the it's a mix between she has a couple of teachers that were there one that was there when I was there, and she has one that was a student at the high school when I went to school with him, and he's also now her teacher. So that's a lot of fun. Sports is funny. So I think it's really interesting to watch her experience going into the sports world at Masco. When I was there, like my 9th grade, my brother was a lacrosse player, and so I had played with him in the yard. There was no girls lacrosse until my 9th grade year. It was the first year, and I decided I don't like softball and I don't want to run track. So to be part of that inaugural class that we went through, and I had learned how to play with him in the backyard a little bit, and now I run the Masco Youth Lacrosse program, and to see like the caliber of athletes that are going into the high school to play lacrosse, it's just a lot of fun to see the growth and the change behind it. I think, and the way also a lot of things stay the same between the towns and the way that they interact with each other.
Yeah.
Some of the stereotypes about the different, it's so, my friends will say, is it the same, Christy? And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of it's the same, but it has shifted a little bit.
Even just numbers too. Like what did you have in your class? I had 182 kids in my class.
We had like
in all 3
280.
towns.
I had just below 200, I think, when we graduated.
Yeah, so mine
we're
was
at
the
what,
bubble.
like
We were like
450?
280. No, what's interesting is that it's dropping again, because I didn't pay attention for a while, and we were in I think like mid 3s, high 3s for a while, and now it's dropping again. I think partially because the tech is so awesome. Like there's so many kids that go to the tech now. I should say my own son is going to St. John's Prep, so there's different reinstatement at North Andover High School, but post-COVID, kids are making a lot of different decisions. But it is interesting to see like the population of students is kind of dropping again.
Yeah, my class was 256.
Yeah, so that's even lower than mine was in 2001. Yeah.
244.
Yeah.
I want to say there were a few years we were at like 350.
Yeah, it was a big bubble.
365. And those were the years that Spofford, there were 8 classrooms that came out, like 8 6th grades. I think there were 2 or 3 years. Now we're back down to 5, but we knew I could probably name still like 80% of my high school class, just because there were only like 180 of us in all 3 towns.
Yeah, I think the thing that's different for her experience as well is that the youth sports mix a lot sooner now. So since 5th grade, soccer and lacrosse have all been, and I think those are just the sports I know. They mix together, and we never did until academically.
Tri-town field day.
Yeah.
Last day of
Yeah,
school.
we
Or
had
like
kids from the other
The
town.
spring fling dance, and you'd go, and it was like 7th
Wait,
grade
you guys got a
was.
dance?
I know, we didn't get a dance.
And it was like,
Probably
you
didn't
know,
go.
chuck everybody in the building and see how it goes. And now I think she's a lot less anxious than I remember being, because she's been playing sports with a lot of the kids from Topsfield and or from Boxford and Middleton.
Yeah,
So
you were lucky too, because Kyle and I had to drive the 20 minutes
yeah,
to get to school.
I usually
We
just
lived
went
in
by and
East
kept
at
going to
that
Middleton, but that's fine.
You mentioned that a few of the teachers are the same.
yeah.
Who are the teachers? Because I don't know if I know them.
I know. So the first one I noticed was Mario Rosario for chorus.
Yes.
I did not have him, but he started when I was
Never
there.
No,
He's amazing, and
Never
he
heard
wears
of
like
Yeah.
very brightly colored shiny shirts and like flowy. He's just a character. And so I was like, he was there. Mr. Cobb. She doesn't have Mr. Cobb, but a few of her friends do. So he was there. I'm trying to think. The one. Who else?
I don't think there's anybody there.
Not from us, no.
No.
Miss Miller is still there.
Oh, Miss Miller.
Miller Charette.
Mary
Miss
Ann.
Miller
Mary Ann
was.
Miller's still
She
there.
came in as a 22-year-old
So
teacher.
she had all
my
three of us.
My senior year. She came in my senior year.
Yeah,
And she was 22 and I was 18.
she's
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like depending when she retires, Charlotte might have her. She'll be like,
Okay.
Yeah. So he was. I'm trying to think. Like Miss Zenos in PE was there when I was there.
I've had all of these teachers.
Yeah,
Like,
and my daughter will have her.
like there's a rumor that Mr. Rosario changed his middle name to Ontario. So he's Mario Ontario Rosario.
That is awesome.
He's amazing.
I remember Miss Zeno's, like, 7th grade PE.
Yeah.
I had Miss Miller Charette junior year,
Yeah.
environmental science.
Okay.
She was, I would, like, tell stories to my friends, and I actually sold one of my friends on taking Envisi for their last year of senior year, because they were like, that sounds crazy, because she would come into class, and she would, like, very obviously she read, like, a news article
Yeah.
about some conservation issue that really upset her, and it's just the whole class.
Yeah.
She would talk about it.
Yeah.
And, like, Mr. Cobb, that was also 7th grade. And when I was in 7th grade, I had really short hair on, like, my sides and then, like, a long hair on
Yeah.
top. And I had, like, bleached my hair. And he told me I looked like a skunk.
This is Vince words. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, it is cool because like Mr. Johnson was the big. He's not. I mean, I think he has since passed, but he was the one that would like when I was there. He had my mom, and for 7th grade, whatever, and he'd call me Jan by accident all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
He'd have like a 35-year brain fart and he'd call me Jan.
I mean, huge numbers of teachers that I had. My
Yeah.
parents both had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of
And
them.
like the guy that taught me how to drive. Well, I already knew how to drive. Really, but the guy, Mr. Paulberg, who did
Tunis?
driver's ed.
Tunis Paul.
Tunis Paulberg. He was, I want to say, 70 something when we were doing driver's ed, and he would fall asleep in the passenger seat while we were driving around. And like they had been there forever.
Mhm.
I think all of my middle school teachers,
Yep.
except one, Mr. Believe Us, didn't have.
Oh my God, Mr. Believe It.
Yeah, he was new, but a lot of them were like, we got that question every class. Are you Alan's kid
Yeah.
or David's kid? And I'd be like, Alan. You say it like a million times, but I'm gonna behave myself.
I think you guys covered, like, most of this. I guess one, because you mentioned, like, for school at least, like, the internet and stuff. Just generally, do you remember getting that in town? Like, I guess internet specifically? Just, like, when that came into town?
We didn't even have cable TV until we used to go over to my grandparents' house in Topsfield to watch Nickelodeon, which was you can't do that on television was the show.
93, I think. Cable came in 94.
But by that point, we were living in East,
Yeah.
and so I don't even know when it came to West, but we did not have cable TV growing up, or I mean, obviously internet, but I don't even remember internet at the barn.
I was in high school.
You were in high school?
We were at the barn. So I remember getting internet, yeah, because we had it. But it was, I tell my students this all the time, and I'm like, I sound like I'm 100. But I remember being, I must have been in 8th grade if we were at the barn, and it was dial up, and I would sit, and it would take 10 minutes. And be like,
Oh, you were so into that. Yeah.
And there were like 8 websites you could actually go to.
And
it
you
was
like
Ask
Instant
Mr.
Messenger.
Yeah.
That was
And it was Ask Mr. Jeeves. There was no Google.
Oh,
Yeah.
S. Jeeves.
And
Yeah.
then you'd wait, and like the page would load, and I'd go like do something for 15 minutes and come back. And but that was like you paid per minute,
Yeah.
and so I was constantly being yelled at. And
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
yeah. And then, but there were certain friends, as with most things, right, that are expensive, that they had it, and like nobody cared how long they were on it. And so after school, there were days where like we'd all go to one person's house to go on. It was AOL. That was all there was. So we'd go in the chat rooms like on AOL after school.
Yeah.
And that was it. But yeah, it was like we'd email each other. But I remember growing up, like, actually even then, my friends and I just for fun would like, we'd write each other letters
Yeah.
and like mail them to each other back and forth, or passing notes in school.
Was a big
So
one.
pre-cell phone or any of that in school, like I'm trying to think, we had the internet at school, but there was no like school-wide email addresses for
Yeah, we
everybody.
No.
We didn't even have computers.
Yeah.
I didn't even have that in college. My
Yeah.
senior year of college,
I had a word processor. I didn't have a computer. And I think through high school I still used the Brother word processor
Yeah.
to like type up a lot of my papers. But I don't remember using the internet in school because there was, except for in like the computer science classroom where they were all hardwired to the internet. Like it's not like there was Wi-Fi. So there was still, I could go home and pull out a box, which I'd miss for our own kids, of notes.
Yeah.
That like we would write notes to each other and pass them. It was an art form to pass them off in class.
I had a class junior year of college. I went to UMass Amherst, and think about that. That like, so the big campus library had 2 computers on like the 4th floor or something like that, and I had a teacher that gave an extra credit assignment that you had to go create an email, like make an email for yourself and send him an email. And that was an extra credit project. So my boyfriend, that was like, and most people didn't even bother with it because it was like, oh, we got to go to the library and like, try to do that. So my boyfriend and I at the time, we were like, it was like some gen ed class or something. We're going to get this, extra 20 points or whatever. So we went and made AOL emails or, whatever at AOL.com. And sent my professor an email. And I would be like, hi, it's Betsy Smallman, sent it to him. And I was like, I don't know if he got it, And I remember saying at that time, like, this stupid email thing is never going to take off. like, this is never. And now I probably send, even in the summer, like when I go to bed at night, I probably answer like 15 emails at night. About various things, like just, and I remember saying that to him as we were walking out of the campus library, like, that was so dumb. And now that they have all my information, and like, I had to put my birthday in and this whole thing, and even at that time, we were so it was so off-putting to like, send it and not know if it got there, like to not know if he got it, that was so weird. And we went and like, say, did you get it? Did you get it? Like, it was this big deal.
I have like 3 emails now.
I know.
Like, I'm a youngin'.
Yeah, I do too. We've got like a Hotmail, a Gmail, and now I have a Proton Mail, which is like a a different one that I'm trying out. But and at school, with the parents in Boxford, I probably feel between 30 and 35 emails a day, like between 8 and 3, about various things.
And technology in general too, with the internet, like now kids, I'm sure you could do this, you can see your grades the second it goes in. So email beyond, like with Power School and all that. And I actually, my husband and I were just talking about it, like what kind of parents do we want to be with the Power School access? Because I don't think it's healthy that parents can see every single thing that their kid is doing academically. Like it takes all of the onus off of. And I tell, again, my students, I'm like, when I was in school, we wrote and we did the best we could, and we did our assignments, or we didn't, and then we did this, and we waited for it to come into the mailbox, and you'd be like, B+, yes. You got it.
Sure.
Now it's like I will, with my students, between their email access, their Power School access, having their phones, I will be on my prep period and I will put grades in. And this is not an exaggeration. It's been within 3 minutes. I have 2 students at my door. Can I make that up? Can I retake it? Why did you take this many points off? Why did you give me this on that? And this dropped my grade point 8, 0.8 of a point. And it's like, oh my Lord. Like, I just gave you another assignment. Go do that one instead of worrying about, there's just like such a hyper focus on micromanaging every single little thing. That's the biggest difference. So that's the part of school for her that
is different.
Guys have spent so much time in the school system being teachers now, and you've watched the whole structure of it evolve, I guess.
Boxford's been a huge.
For me, I'm not a fan of the internet or any of that stuff. To this, I have no idea what Power School is, but I understand. Obviously, I run a business. I understand the need, but to watch the way it's shaped, you guys have seen it from the total other end of the spectrum to where it's 180 degrees now that you almost can't do anything in school without access. Can't do anything at all without access to it.
Yeah. Even now, I've got third graders with watches. Yeah. That this past year it's a safety issue because an 8-year-old interprets an emergency differently than an adult does. and had interpreted something as an emergency at bus dismissal that was not an emergency, and immediately has the parent on the watch. The bus isn't here, it's not coming, it's broken, it's the whole thing, and I'm 6 feet away and can't even prevent that chaos from happening because of the technology that's on their wrist, and that the parent reacted in a very negative way, and it was 2 hours of clearing up a misunderstanding that it was not an emergency. It was how the 8-year-old interpreted that situation. That's tough. That's
Right.
and there's more and more. The watches are kind of blowing up our spot in elementary school hugely, because it's making the children panicked. They feel like if they have that venue to contact their parents, that they need to. And so they boop, with the touch of their wrist.
There's no independence building.
Yeah, or they're scared.
Yeah.
They're afraid that everything around them is something they need to tell their parents about, that's really hard. That's been for me like the biggest whoa, is the watches, even more than the tablets, because the tablets at least we could
You take
control
away.
them.
Yeah.
The watches are different. So now. Administratively, we've got to write watches into policies, into
Same
our
at the high
handbook.
school.
Yeah,
Like I would take everybody in my class when I take their phones, they have to give their phones up at the beginning of class. But then they've all got, and I look out and they're all
yeah.
doing this the whole class.
Imagine what Miss
and
O'Birdie would have
texting.
said if
Yeah.
you
She's
had
the teacher at Masco.
Yeah.
She would have ripped him right off our wrist and
Yeah.
stepped on him.
Yeah.
It's just very different. So, yeah, we'll see. My kids are the only ones I think left in their grades that don't have phones yet, and she's going to Masco without a phone. So we'll see how it goes.
I
But
think that's taken hold.
Yeah.
There's other families I've heard of that aren't doing that,
Yeah.
so that's good.
I'll have to find them.
Yeah, yeah. But I just in the last 2 years, the watches have been explosively problematic.
Well, and I think because it came up in our household too, as far as like the iWatches, right?
Yeah.
So like it's a people see it as a bridge. Like we won't give them a phone yet, but we'll give them a watch. But they don't necessarily realize that the watch can almost be, because you can't, it's on the body, whereas
Yeah.
like their phone they can take away. So, that was, it came up with amongst my kids in their friend group of like, well, why don't you get them a watch? It's a
Yeah.
good bridge. And it's like, no, it's just being in the classroom and you see what happens every day.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
told them never. I'm like, when you can afford to pay for it yourself is when you're going to get one.
yeah. And when they can developmentally, like I said, even tell when something's an emergency and when it's not. I mean, you give someone that kind of power to contact people when they are 8, and this is not an emergency.
And I think to like loop it back to sort of like the history of being, right, like at Masco, this came up this year because we had a gas leak at the middle school in North Andover, and it became, it was an emergency, but it became even more of an emergency because you had a bunch of middle schoolers, and actually the opposite, freaking out because they had to evacuate the school and their phones were all in their lockers. And so they were more, like the gas leak wasn't even the emergency, it was the fact that they had to leave their phones in their lockers overnight until they could clear, and parents were furious and could not get over it. And I think back to so my last year at Masco was the last year in the old building. We were the last class to graduate before they opened the new building. So they were building the new building, and we were in what is now the middle school, used to be the high school building. And they hit a gas line, and a girl passed out in the library, and they figured out there was a gas leak, and we had to evacuate the school. None of us had cell phones. So I look back now at like the way that day went down compared to how that would go down
I
now.
remember that call.
And he was on the fire department in Boxford, and it was, it was chaos, but it was like managed chaos, and we all evacuated, and they were able to tell everybody, like, there wasn't as much of the rumor mill was there, but it wasn't as fast. So,
yeah,
and we all had to, march down the street to Trinity Church, and I just went home. At that point we lived walking distance, so I just walked home. But that now would look very different with a bunch of high school kids with phones in their hands. Which again, there's positives and negatives to that, but it can create a lot more chaos. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I actually need to make sure. Yeah, so there's 15 minutes left
Okay.
on the card. So I don't want to like cut anything short, but I also don't want to like cut you guys off.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll ask two more things. One, because fire department,
Mhm.
and that reminded me. A while ago, I interviewed Rich Lucius, and he mentioned Masco caught fire once because of fireworks.
Mhm.
I was, yeah,
Mark,
that was a
She
friend
was there.
of mine.
those were friends of ours. Yeah.
It was supposed to be it was a senior prank.
Yeah.
Which we're not allowed. No one's allowed to do
Yeah,
anymore.
Ben Wahlberg, actually Ben Wahlberg, who has passed away, was a photographer. He was into photography at the time, and he had pictures of it. We had T-shirts that he had made, and I don't know what happened to my T-shirt, but there are friends of ours that still have their T-shirt. But it was supposed to be a senior prank. I was a freshman, and we were all in the front lawn of the school, and this poor kid had just gotten like this awesome scholarship, like a military scholarship, and he was accepting this military scholarship, and the fireworks went off. They didn't really actually go off.
They shoot down a
No,
little
they
bit.
tipped over.
No,
They tipped over.
they burned.
Just tipped over and lit the tar. on
Yeah, and the entire banner that went across the front of the school. It was actually ingenious, and the kid.
Well, wasn't it what was supposed to happen was fireworks were supposed to go off and the banner was
Well, they
supposed to unfurl.
Well, and the part of it was it's supposed to burn the two
Yeah.
little pieces of twine that were
To,
holding the banner.
Yeah.
And then the banner was supposed to unfurl, and it was like class of 91 or class of, whatever it was that was going to come down in front of the school. And that was when senior pranks were senior pranks. Like, that was, we did good ones then. But, so the entire banner instantly went up like, whoa, in flames, and it was over this part of the building called A Wing, and it was a huge study hall. And so, and Glenn Walker, who was a police officer in Topsfield forever, but he worked at Spofford. That was like our biggest quote was, "Mr. Walker, the school's on fire," or something like that. But it was, they were 10-foot flames on the top of the school while this big furled banner burned. And the entire school was there to see it on the front of the building. So we were all just like, and then the tar
started melting
down through the ceiling, and like the tar on the roof was like, it ruined the ceiling and the whole A-Wing study. So like everybody had A-Wing study at one point during the day. If you were in high school, you had A-Wing study at one point. So then like A-Wing study was damaged.
It was where like the middle school, I think it's now
It's
the
where
middle
the
school
main part of the
library
school is now.
is
Yeah.
on the front of the building. Like that little jut out wasn't there. It was just flat across the front.
It was actually
It
an
was a
ingenious idea, but the
Execution was
pyrotechnics
a little
were a little, they took a risk with the pyrotechnic part of it that unfortunately didn't work out, but that was a day. That was quite a day in Masco history for sure. And I was 15,
Yeah.
sitting on the grass, and I was screaming like, is this supposed to happen? Because you just came into high school and you're scared of high school, and you're like, is this what happens at all the award ceremonies? Is a bonfire on the top of the school? But yeah, you guys were in middle school.
I was in 8th grade. I think
Yeah.
you were a sophomore. Yeah.
I was a sophomore
I was in 8th grade. Yeah, because I was in the cafeteria.
when it happened.
Yeah.
This was a high school awards assembly. So, and I wish I could remember. He was such an awesome kid because he got like a full scholarship, some military scholarship to
forever
somewhere.
knows the moment.
And
that
the poor
school
kid's
set
up
on
there
fire.
accepting his scholarship, and everything goes off and the school's on fire. And no one remembered. I just remember him standing
Obviously,
there.
nobody remembers him.
I just remember. I remember that's my memory being like, oh man, it overshadowed his. Him getting his award. I felt bad for him that had happened. It might have been Rich Crossan, who went to West Point.
Yeah, it might have been. You might be right.
Yeah.
Who owns Alarmex?
Yeah.
He coaches lacrosse.
Yeah, and his kids are
And
they're
yeah.
at Essex Tech. Yeah.
Oh, I'll ask him.
I asked him if it was him this year, and I said, "Are you Rich Crossan?" Forgot about the fire though. I should have asked him if that was him.
Yeah.
All right, so last one real quick because we might actually this might cut out halfway through now.
That's
But
okay.
it'll be all right. So people are always like kids these days with their music and their movies. What was it like for you guys when you were younger? What were there like any big things in town, like musical artists or big movies that everyone that was like the buzz?
Not really. I mean, popular culture really wasn't a thing till you got over, for me anyway. I listened to classic rock and roll that my parents listened to at the house, and I never really, till you got over and interacted with other people at what I would say high school.
Yeah.
I mean, so I would say when I was getting my license, it was 97, 98, which was like the height of
Oh yeah.
90s rap.
AM and FM.
And I remember
AM or FM.
I
I'll tell
do
you that.
remember driving around town, to your point of kids these days, I think one of the things I remember most is being who we were and being people knowing us. That was more that's where I go when you ask that question is my friends will always say I was hyper aware of I'll remember it right here, driving through town with my friend in her Jeep, and she's blaring some inappropriate 90s rap song and me reaching over and turning it down and her being like, "You're such a dork," and I'm like, "Well, there's Mr. Cunningham's right there, Mr. So-and-so's right there. They're gonna hear this and they're gonna tell my dad, and I'm gonna be."
Oh, that
So
was good.
that
We got
was-
tattled on a lot by people in
Yeah,
town. They saw us
everybody
doing
knew.
things,
So
yeah.
that's where I go with that question is it is so, you're right. I, as a teacher now, have to try to stop myself when my kids are listening to whatever they listen to, and I'm like, oh God. And the funny thing is, they think I'm old because I liked 90s rap, which at the time it's so that part is funny. I say DMX, and they're like, "Oh, he's so old school," And I'm like, "Oh my God." But that was it. Yeah. And then I think that's it. Is that we were aware of what we did when it came to stuff because 9.5 out of 10 times,
Yeah.
it got back to our we very much grew up with there's always somebody watching you, and there's always somebody hearing, and
It was more of
true.
a respect thing. You didn't, you didn't want, not everybody wanted to hear words like that.
Yeah, and it was you're right, and it was
like you said, Richie and Harriet could be coming out of the store or something.
Or Mr. and Mrs. Perkins,
Right.
coming out of the
And my husband is not from a small town, and he will do, even now, he'll have his music on loud, and he laughs at me, I'll turn it down, and I'm like, everybody doesn't need to, he doesn't want to hear what we're listening to, and my kids are slowly learning it, but I think that was more of somebody saw everything you did. A lot of the times we were driving, our dad's
Which
name
loops
was
back-
on the side of the truck
Which
too.
moves back to having relationships with
Yeah.
your neighbors and stuff, that sense of community.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to think as far as trends. Is that what you want to a little
Yeah,
bit
were
of what
there-
the trends were? Britney Spears was
Yeah.
I literally grew up. We're the same age, so it was when she got big at 13. I was 13, and that was probably the biggest wave.
I was more 80s hair bands.
Yeah.
Which I still am.
I don't think I was very trendy.
And we were the grunge, my high school era was grunge, Nirvana,
Yeah.
all those bands, which actually my youngest son's super into, the Smashing Pumpkins and
That's all coming back.
Yeah,
That's how we know we're old.
yeah, right.
I listen to a little bit of Nirvana. AC/DC's not grunge, that's more classic rock.
Yeah.
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So those things, the Nirvana and the AC/DC, I remember Mom not liking that we would blast that everywhere, especially if it was our dad's truck that had his name on the side.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think movies that were big, Goonies and stuff, which are now
yeah,
those
I
were
guess.
the big ones.
Molly
when we were
Greenwald
young.
was a 16
Yeah.
favorite.
Well, you had to go to the movies. You had to go to
I was gonna say.
Danvers. or
Yeah, you go to
something.
Danvers to go to the movies.
Never went. Cause,
I think the only movie I remember us going to was Free Willy.
let's see, that was after.
And I only remember because Dad fell asleep through the whole thing. But it was like an event. I
Yeah.
feel like.
Oh, yeah.
When we went to the movies.
Yeah. We didn't even have a VHS until we all got chicken pox. When Dad went and got a VHS because there was a video store in Georgetown.
Yeah, Video 2000.
Video 2000 it was called. And that was the first time we had movies in the house, was when they went and got a VHS player. Apple Dumpling Gang was the was the first video we ever saw. But yeah, we didn't even,
Yep.
movies weren't really even a thing.
No.
We watched TV, the 3 channels that we had on TV. Honestly, 4, 5, and 7, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we never had cable.
And then later on, 38 and 56.
And then 38 and 56 you could watch, yeah.
I still remember all the cable like channels that I watched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I knew like you could get SpongeBob on 825 and
Yeah.
then, like Disney had its own thing.
Before it went to streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is one thing I think my kids will never know is like getting, and I remember what he says, is like getting home in time. Like I do remember like I guess TJF was a big cultural thing when I was in elementary school, was TJF TV, which was like Full House, Step by Step,
I don't even know what that
Family
is.
Matters. So it was every Friday starting at 8. There were 4 half-hour
What's
sitcoms.
TJF?
TGIF, thank God it's Friday.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Whatever,
Okay.
but it's 8 o'clock was Full House. And I think 8:30 was Family Matters. Like 9 o'clock was Step by Step. And I remember
That
like
sounds terrible.
trying to be
If you missed it, you missed it.
Yeah, and if you missed it, you missed it. And that was like the cultural thing, is like at school, if everybody was talking about it and you forgot to watch, you're like, well,
Yeah,
missed that opportunity in life.
yeah, it's gone. Yeah, I'll never see that.
Yeah, and now to hear, it is funny, like a lot of my high school students are now going back, and like my daughter watched all of Full House, the
Yeah.
whole thing from beginning to end during COVID, I think.
That's a little
Yeah.
it's a little scary.
Yeah. She like, they're rewatching, or like Friends, like all my high school kids are like binge watching Friends, which that was a big
I
thing.
watched Little House on the Prairie. That was my Little House and Magnum PI, and like all
Yeah.
those were the ones that were on when I was a kid. And then you knew it was bedtime if MASH came on. Remember when MASH would come on?
Yeah.
Which is a parody on Vietnam, and then
Korea.
you knew that Korea. Was it?
Yeah.
I just thought it was Vietnam. And you
Everybody
knew it was
remembers
bedtime. You knew it was bedtime when MASH came on, when that music came on, because it was like 8:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were up too late. Yeah.
For me, it was you watch. It's called Cartoon Network,
Yeah.
and then after all the like kids cartoons, it would be Adult Swim, and then
Yeah,
they would play
yeah.
like King of the Hill and like The Simpsons. It was like, oh, can't watch
Yeah.
that. I got
Inappropriate.
I got in trouble once because I watched the first part of an episode of, I think it was King of the Hill.
Yeah.
It's like, I got so mad. I didn't mean to. I didn't touch the TV remote.
I'll bring it back full circle to is when I was babysitting, and I can tell how old I was by what house we lived in at the time. I was my daughter's age now, which is slightly terrifying, so I think I must have been 12, watching Saturday Night Live, and I remember telling the story at the people on Barnside, and I remember the parents coming home, and there was like some inappropriate. I just remember being embarrassed that like the skit on Saturday Night Live they were gonna think was inappropriate for me to be watching, and I remember being horrified by it. And now as an adult, I look back and I'm like, if that skit was on, it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was 12 watching their infant and their 6-year-old.
Their infant and their
So I was like, who should feel more uncomfortable in that situation? But that was the difference, is like I would never now. My daughter and my son, they stay home alone, but like they just did their first babysitting job last week together, and the parent was home but working from home. Versus when I was 12 and it was 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm watching Saturday Night Live with like just a landline, and that was it. And they came home from wherever at 1 in the morning. So.
Yeah.
that part is different too. But I can remember by what the skit was on Saturday Night Live, like that it was almost the end of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, you knew what time it was.
Yeah.
And then at one point there was no TV, like an American flag would come on and they'd play the national anthem at 2 a.m. and then there was no TV from like 2 a.m. to 4:30, 5 a.m. Yeah, it was just an American flag. Like you would turn it on, it was an American flag. That was all that was there. There was no programming between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
I remember it was infomercials. They replaced that.
Yeah.
It was like, dang, I'm 10 years old and I should not be awake.
For the Chocomatic.
They're talking about like a self-sharpening knife. I don't know what's going on anymore.
True. Right. But you wanted that knife, I know.